Welcome to another exciting edition of In the Chute. My son is on the other side of the screen. That's Kalen. I'm on this side of the screen. I'm Brandon. Kalen, what do you got for us today on In the Chute?
So I'm in Kentucky country, which is racehorse country. And I thought of a question. People often associate training horses with training racehorses. And I want to explain the difference. So can you kind of go about what exactly is the difference between training a regular horse? For example, we have using horses or gated horses and whatever you want to do with those horses. But then there's also the racehorse, the horse that it literally is taught to, as soon as the bell goes off, to hit that finish line as soon as it can. What's the difference between training those two types of animals?
I mean, there's a tremendous amount of difference without me knowing anything about training a racehorse. I can tell you
Right.
that. I mean, they're they have no right turn. They are only a left turn, and it's gradual, and at high speed, and to beat every other horse. There's some things with that I know, enough to be really dangerous and discredit myself, but there's some training about getting them in the box, having them stand quiet, having them paying attention, anticipating that bell. I mean, some of those horses, you've seen them in some races where, it's taken 3 or 4 or 5 people to literally stand up inside there, one lead through, then a couple people pushing this horse in. I mean, um, and, and I don't know what their training technique is. And you may just have a horse that's just wiggy, I mean, he may be just right on the edge of crazy. And, but he doesn't buck a rider off, and he'll run. And I think that that's really what it's about in some of those cases. Um, and I think for the most part, I think it's really more about conditioning on a racehorse
That's
and
kind of
and
what I
hitting.
thought too. Is mostly just
Yeah,
it's like an athlete. I look at it as an athlete versus a worker, right? You
right.
teach the person how to do the work, which is what we do,
Yep.
versus they take the athlete and they sprint work, agility
Yeah,
work, type of stuff like that.
and I'm sure there's some work that they do with desensitization of crowds and noise and
Mhm.
things that are going on in the infield. I mean, you can't not have that kind of discipline with a horse, or at least some familiarity with it, where they're not worried about it, because a horse is a horse. They'll spook, run away from something generally, but um, in our horses, we want them to slow down. We want them to think and to react, but not overreact. And then we want them to have good guidance about out in the middle. They're listening to you. And I think the racehorse, they're listening to that jockey as well, because they're holding them back, or they're using their quirt on them at the right time. I mean, you still have to have that kind of control, but I think we have more control, I think, for the greater part. Uh, and partially is because of the amount of time you ride them. What's the average horse race? A couple minutes, 3 minutes, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like
Um,
Kentucky Derby is like what, 90 seconds essentially.
well, no, it's a little longer than that, but it's not. I mean, what did Secretariat do? Like 2 minutes and 30 some seconds or some, I mean,
Yeah,
just a tremendous, I mean, my point is it's a very, very short amount of time. It's a fraction of what we would ride a horse, say, just to go out and move cattle, or even a training session with a horse. We may ride a horse for an hour in a training session, or 2 hours, or as they are progressed and they're old enough and muscled up enough, as an athlete gets, when you treat them like an athlete and you condition them, we may ride them 4 or 5 hours. We may ride them all day, uh, and then having different disciplines. Just riding, working cattle, riding through cattle, which itself is a discipline. Putting a pack saddle on them and taking them in the mountains, or just riding them in the mountains. I mean, there's all of those are different disciplines, and it's about desensitization for the most part, and control. Then getting that horse to listen to you. So I think there's some similarities, but I think it's just really different based on, again, whichever genre of uh, thing you want to do.
yeah. Well, and the other thing too, I would argue, is based off of the understanding that we have, where it's more conditioning training for racehorses. The race trainers, like one of the more famous ones is Bob Baffert. He's had a many Kentucky Derby winners. Uh, to me, it seems as though they can probably, in a sense, train more horses because they have people that they can say, hey, go run this type of exercise regimen with this
Right.
horse, versus we are actually
Us.
doing the work on the horse. So there's a big difference between, we can handle maybe 1 to 3 horses at a time, whereas he could potentially be doing 100 at a time.
Right. Yeah. Because he's standing there doing this,
Finger point. Yeah.
pointing his finger, and it's his brain, and it's what he is wanting this horse to do based on what he sees and what he thinks this horse needs and how to achieve that. But yeah, he's having somebody else doing the work. He's got the game plan. He's the guy who's wanting to do it and comes up with it, and then somebody else executes. That supposedly or should be exactly to what he's telling them to do. Yeah, there's a huge difference there. Same thing as guys that are um, they hire people to do training for like reining, for instance, or what other discipline, the whatever it is you want to do, show arena. They may be doing some of the training themselves, but they also might have other people doing the training, and they may be doing a combination where they're doing some real fine finish stuff and have to do it themselves. But initially, a lot of those guys they're not getting on these horses.
Right.
They're
Well, they're
having
also too
somebody
big.
else. A lot of them are too. Oh, on especially on the race horses. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
What's jockey weigh?
I think the average jockey size now somewhere between 115 to 130 when
Yeah, I was
I've
gonna say
seen the
130
stats.
tops. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're pretty
And
small
so
guys.
they're small guys, very small guys. And
Well, and
I mean,
the other
lighten
thing
the
too
load,
is
that's part of it.
yeah, well, sorry, I was thinking of the regiment too. So they what do you think the I guess this is the question. How many racehorse trainers have you talked to, if at all?
Like guys like Baffert, zero. But
Yeah.
but smaller venues, local venues, just a couple, and they're like every other trainer. They've all got their own way of doing stuff or their own
Uh-huh.
ideas, you know, and
Yeah.
and part of it is too, they want to get that horse to the most out of them without the horse quitting or spitting, what's called spitting the bit.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
because you push something so hard and they were like finally they just give up. You don't want that in a racehorse. You go from first to last pretty fast doing that. um but a lot of them have their own thought process, their own way of doing it. Largely in a greater sense, I think it's very similar, but they're all individuals as well.
And kind of sticking with the conditioning part, for them, how I understand it is it's going to be something like sprint work or runs to kind of work their lungs and their heart to get them
Right.
into tip top shape. For us, what is the difference with that for the training regimen?
um we're really not looking for to push for conditioning. I'm not. The conditioning will happen just because you're working them. That'll happen on its own. But I do want them to, we're going to run these horses, lope them, put them in a high as fast as they'll go towards the end of their training, so that you can do that. There's another gear. I mean, that's just one more thing that you want this horse to be able to perform for. And usually by that time, I've never had really an issue with a horse at high speed. They trust you. You've got their training done. Now they've just gotten into a little higher speed. Um, but I want the horse to be able to breathe, and I'm working them at a spot where I'm not gonna ask a horse to do something who's winded. I'm not gonna run a horse, lope him a whole bunch, and then all of a sudden, and he's tired, he needs a rest, and then push him into another gear. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna watch his body system, what he's doing, how he's breathing, how he's laboring. Is he laboring too much? Am I pushing his muscles? Do I feel him becoming unsteady in his muscle movement? And meaning sometimes you can feel them, start to shake a little bit, just a little bit unsteady. Their foot placement. I'm looking for that stuff. I'm watching for that stuff so I don't get there. When I do, then I start slowing them down, get them back, and let them rest. But conditioning for us is not something that we're trying to go for first. It is a secondary thing that happens because of the way we're riding and all of the other things we're doing with them. I think that's one of the bigger differences.
Well, and would you argue that what we focus on is more of skills and knowledge of the horse versus the physical aspect too?
Yeah, it is, but we are asking the horse to do things that they normally wouldn't do on their own. Like a rollback. I mean, they'll do it, but only when maybe another horse is after them or something. But we're asking them to do that and to work off of pressure, and depending on what they're doing, pull their head around. I mean, how many horses do you see outside of scratching themselves or trying to uh, take care of an itch on their back or their side or their flank? really crank their head around to the side and get some flexibility, that they, they're flexing on the movement on that neck and back. They normally don't do that a lot on their own. We'll do that, but it's part of getting that body to move. And I don't know how much that is done in a racehorse type of discipline. I would imagine they're doing some of that, because I'm sure you'd want some flexibility. You just don't want those muscles to be bound up. But I don't know. They may not. No idea.
All right. Well, that is the difference between training normal horses and training racehorses.